we're going to be diving into the second half of the psalm that we started last week. And so if you have your Bible, go ahead and open up to Psalm chapter 33. Psalm chapter 33. And last week we began this psalm, and we said that we don't really know who wrote it. We're not really sure who the author was, but we do know that what it's about is clearly authentic, passionate worship. That should be not something that we have to fabricate, but that's the natural reaction of everyone who is truly thankful for that amazing grace that they received, that salvation that they have received from God. And so we should be crying out in thanksgiving. And last week, we kind of like tiptoed into like some areas of controversy as we talked about how to use music to do that as the psalm addressed, right? And so we had that little short discussion of should we use contemporary or traditional? And we said, really it's not about style, right? What it's about is that passionate, purposeful worship that we are lifting up as Thanksgiving, and that should be what we're saying, which is what Darla talked about just now. We should sing those songs on purpose, not just making noises. We should sing these songs as praise to Him. And so that's where the whole psalm starts, and that's the context of everything. But then when you get to the rest of the psalm, what you're going to see is it goes into a more broadly controversial topic, and it's a topic I can say with a lot of confidence that unless you're Buena and we're outside and just heard me preach on it, you probably never heard me preach on this topic ever before, and that's politics. Okay? And now everybody's like, well, let's go ahead and just leave. And I want to make sure that I clarify this. There's two things. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. Well, it depends on who you are, I guess. Hopefully it won't be too bad. But let me give you these two observations before I get into it. Number one, this is not a message that is targeting any one particular person or group in any way. This is also not a message that I planned because of recent events that I have gone through in my life or have witnessed on the television. Some of you know that we just went camping, and so I felt like I had to say this because one of the topics that comes up if you're camping with your family is what? Politics. It's just going to happen. And I'm not targeting any fireside conversations that might have happened out at that camp out. This was planned long before that. It was outlined way before we left on the camp out. Okay, so I want to make sure all parties involved know that this is not targeting any individual who might have been camping with us this weekend. Also, this is not something that I enjoy talking about. Okay, politics is something I tend to avoid because I don't like the innate hostility that it kind of brews in this country. And we all know that, right? Hostility comes from politics. It kind of makes people feisty, all right? But I think that because of that is why when the Bible brings us to passages like this, if we're going to be faithful to His Word, we need to talk about those because that's the truth that we need to let drive us, even in the area that tends to be so controversial, which is politics. And so kind of having that in mind, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk us through this passage kind of verse by verse like I usually do, but I don't have specific points because I don't feel like being faithful to the passage, I can break it into several subpoints. Really, it's just one driving point that he develops all the way to the end of the psalm where he then brings us back to worship. And so the one point is our gist, which is hope is in Jesus, not humanity. So is there hope for America? Yes. But that hope doesn't come from humanity. That hope comes from Jesus and Jesus alone. And I think everybody that hears me say that in this room is probably going to say absolutely, right? But what we need to make sure we get to, and I hope that as we study through this, we'll see that that's where the psalmist was at, is this cannot just be kind of the Christian response that we give when we don't want to get political. Okay, you guys have all been there, like somebody's talking about politics, you're like, well, you know what? I think this world just needs Jesus. And people sometimes say that because they don't actually want to talk to you about whatever you're talking about, right? And it has to go beyond just that. And it has to be the truth that we embrace and the truth that we live, that this world really does need Jesus more than anything else, right? So I'm going to pray and we're going to walk through this and just kind of see how he develops this incredible, incredible truth. Father, thank you. Lord, thank you that you give us a chance to come into your house and study your word. And I thank you so much, Lord, that I don't have to try and come up with clever words to say, that I don't have to try and come up with motivational speeches to give every week, because your word is what we need, not me. And so I ask, and Lord, I beg of you, that I would not be an interruption, that I would not be a distraction in any way today, but Lord, that I would hear your word, that I would be changed by your word, and that all of us who are gathered in this place right now, that we would hear your voice. And Father, that would change us. Lord, I pray this every single Sunday as we get up here, that we would hear your word, that we'd be changed by your word, that it would then overflow in our lives, and that we would go out and we would share you more faithfully, we would share you more passionately, that we would love you better because we've met with you in this place. But that's what this should be about. So I just ask, Lord Jesus, that you open our eyes to see that. I know, Lord, that there are times when preaching a message is so easy, because the truth is just so clear and so enjoyable to talk about. And there's sometimes, God, that it's hard. Lord, it's hard to open your word. And so I pray, Lord Jesus, that you would take this passage that is harder to talk about. And Father, you would do all the talking. And that we would do, including me, we would do all the listening. And we'd be changed by you. Thank you for your inspired word. And thank you for the plans that you have for this time right now. So may you be glorified in Jesus' name. Amen. So what we're going to do is we kind of walk through, starting in verse 10, all the way to verse 22. And so the first chunk is really kind of setting the stage for us, and then it just develops that same point over and over. Basically what we're going to see is he's going to take these 2 points, that our hope is in Jesus and not humanity, and he's going to contrast them over and over again. Like, this is why our hope is in Jesus, our hope is in the Lord, and this is why it should not be in humanity. He's going to go back and forth and back and forth and really hammer home where our hearts should be on this. So we'll just start by looking at verse 10 and kind of break down what we see here. So it says, the Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the people. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the people. And the reason he does that is because he is sovereign and we're not, right? How many times in your life have you made plans that did not go the way that you thought they were going to go? Everybody's, some of you are laughing because some guys have gone very much not the way you thought they were going to go, right? We all do that. And when we think about even as a nation, right, it says that he frustrates the plans of the people, but he brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. When we think about nations in this world, how often have there been grandiose plans that nations have had that come to nothing? Again and again and again. We like to think about the bad ones, right? Because then we're like, yeah, look at that. Like, Hitler had a grandiose plan for the world. Did it work? No, right? Because there is a person who is more powerful than any political force in this world, and that's Jesus, right? His plans cannot be thwarted by any kind of efforts. And that goes for our plans as well. How many times has the direction of our nation shifted? Many times. Is it going to happen again if the Lord tarries? It will, again and again and again. One of my favorite verses, I think Randy had quoted this a couple weeks ago in our Inside service as well. Proverbs 19:21 expresses that same thought, right? It says, many are the plans in the mind of man, but it's the purpose of the Lord that will stand, right? We can have all kinds of plans and all kinds of purposes, but the one thing that stands is his purpose and his plan, because he is sovereign and we're not, right? And we can see that in the next verse. It says, the counsel of the Lord stands forever, and the plans of his heart to all generations, right? Our counsel and our plans, they change. Okay, I can tell you even my opinions shift. Okay, have you guys ever had something that you really hated and now you like it? Right? As children, I have seen our kids go from hating certain vegetables to now loving them, and I have seen the opposite happen. Kids who used to love vegetables now hate them, okay? And we see that on these little small scales, but we also see that in big opinions. People change their minds constantly, but does God change his mind? No, right? His truth has stood the test of time because he stands the test of time, right? He has never been changed. He will never be changed. He is faithful, right? And so we trust not in the counsel of the world, which is like shifting sand. We can't trust in the counsel of God that does not change. And I would tell you this, the counsel of God, is it necessarily popular with the world right now? No. Has it always been popular with the world? No, but has it changed? It's never changed, right? For all of time, the counsel of the Lord has been the same. And so we trust in that foundation, not the shifting sands that so often this world is built on. And then we get to verse 12, and I feel like this is kind of the crux. This will be where I camp out the longest. Because this is what I see is like the hint pin for this entire passage. It says, blessed is a nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage. You guys have probably heard that verse before, right? You probably quoted that verse before, and it's a beautiful, beautiful passage. It says, blessed is a nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen for his heritage, and we should want that, right? We should want to experience that. But there's a couple things I want to make sure that we don't miss in this. And I will tell you, this is probably the closest that you will ever get from me as kind of like direct political commentary. And I'm only going to say it because I see us missing out on this so often as a nation, and we shouldn't, okay? So much strife and contention happens because we forget this. Okay, the first thing it says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, which is fantastic, but that's a designation that we don't just get to choose for ourselves, okay? And here's what I mean. We want this nation to be God's country, but can we honestly say that this is God's country? Not like that. Okay, let me explain. There are times that people would say, you know what, the new Israel, we have the Israel in the Old Testament, and those were the chosen people of God, and then the New Testament came along, and that changed a little bit, and now America is the new people of God. No, there is a new people of God. Really, it's not new, it's the same. It's the same as it's always been. Who are the people of God? Those who follow after him, right? Israel was the nation that kind of embodied that, but did they perfectly follow after him? No. But they were the ones that he chose to show what that was supposed to look like. And then they messed up so much, he said, listen, I want to show you what this is really about. My people are those who love me. And so the people who love him are the church, right? His body, the body of Christ, that is the people of God. America is not the people of God, okay? Because in order to be the nation that is serving the Lord, that means that as a nation, we should be serving the Lord, right? And if we look around and we see everything, and some of you are looking very uncomfortable right now, but I want to make sure we see this. As we look around and we look at the way this nation is going, do we as a nation serve God? No, we don't, right? And so often we want that blessing. We want the blessed is the nation part. But we forget this rest of it, which is who's God is the Lord, which means that we serve him with everything, and we don't, right? So we can't just choose that designation and say, yes, we are God's people. No, we should want to be God's people, but we're not there yet. That will only happen when, as a country, we do what? Surrender to him, right? We can't serve him and country and say that, yes, he's going to bless what we're doing. We have to serve him and him alone, right? And so the second thing I want to look at, and this is a part I feel like I could get very misunderstood, so I want to make sure we see what we're seeing here. That means that if being blessed as a nation comes from serving him and him alone, then we have to seek him and him alone. Now, can Jesus use politics? Yes, okay? But is Jesus innately political? No, okay, Jesus is not a politician, okay? He doesn't run for any particular party. He is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We all serve him, right? And so what we have to be so incredibly careful about is trying to equate Christianity with any one political view, okay? And this is what I'm saying. I'm not picking on Republicans. I'm not picking on Democrats. I'm picking on them all, okay? We're gonna pick on them all, because is there a single party in this country that perfectly represents Jesus Christ? No, there isn't, okay? They're all messed up, okay? Just like we're all messed up, right? And so too often we see this happening. If you guys have watched the news or pay attention, too often what we see happening is a particular party or a particular stance is given that designation as Christian, but what should be looked at as what it means to be a Christian? People following after Christ, right? And I pray that people never look at any particular political party and look at what they do and what they decide to put into action and say, well, that's what it means to be a Christian, because there is widespread pettiness and sin on both sides of that fence, right? There's no such thing as a Christian political party in this nation, right? There isn't. And so we have to make sure that when we're talking and when we're engaging, we are pointing people back to who? Jesus, right? And I know, like, you guys, this is usually like a group where we're laughing and we're having a good time, and I can tell you, I can see everybody's faces and nobody's laughing right now, right? Some of you look very uncomfortable. Some of you are like, how close can I get to that door without him realizing I'm gonna see you all? Okay, I'm too high, right? I can see all of you. But I know it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because we don't want to think about this. We want to just live life as it is, but we live in a country that is so politically tense, right? And too often what has happened is Christians have jumped into the middle of that fray, and we have tied ourselves to one stance or one party and said, yes, this is what it means to be Christian, but no, it's not. What it means to be Christian is to be someone who follows after wholeheartedly the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's who I serve. And that's why we want our nation to serve. So what we need in this nation isn't for one political party to beat out the other. What we need is what? Revival. We need revival. It says, blessed is the nation that belongs to God, because he's chosen them and is using them to further his kingdom. That's what we want. What is part of the Lord's Prayer? Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So what we want to see happen, what should be our prayer, is, God, I want the same thing that's happening in heaven to be happening down here and in heaven. What you want happens. And what you decree is true and faithful and followed. And that's what I want to see happening right here. And I know the only way that will happen is if this country comes to its knees and starts serving you. And if they don't come to their knees, they will never serve you, right? And so no other means is ever going to save this nation from sin. Only Jesus, right? And so this should be the cry of our heart, that we want to be those who find our hope in the Lord, because we are seeking him and him alone, right? That's the most controversial part. The rest of it, you're like, okay, fine, we're good now. Okay, so verse 13 then shows us why this perspective should be ours, because it kind of gives us God's perspective. It says, the Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the children of men. From where he sits enthroned, he looks out on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashioned the hearts of them all observes all their deeds. And so we see his perspective is heavenly, okay? He's the king that rules from on high. It's omnipresent. He sees everybody all the time. He's omniscient. He knows all the hearts of men because he made all those hearts. So he sees everything and he knows everything because he made everything. And how pale by comparison does our perspective seem to that? Can any of us say that we see everything and we know everything because we made everything? Not even close. We don't come even a fraction close to what that truth is, right? And so how futile is it to serve men who can't see the world the way that he does? Right? There's no such thing as a flawless leader except for Jesus, right? And he sees everything and he knows everything because he made everything, but we don't. Look at what it says in verse 16. By contrast, he says, but the king is not saved by his great army, and the warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might, he cannot rescue. Now, I know the war horse thing seems like super dated, but what were war horses at this time? If you had a whole bunch of them, what did that mean? Power, right? You were going to win. Okay? And the more war horses you had, the more successful your army was going to be, right? And so this is saying that strength does not come from great political might or a strong leader or technology that is more advanced. That's basically what it is, right? That we have more stuff. That's not going to save us. And we know that. Okay, we all know that. We all get that. But when we're having conversation, how often do we kind of fall into that kind of mindset that, if our country was stronger or smarter or whatever, right? If we had something more than we have now, then everything would start to fall into place. And is it true? No. There's one herb that our nation needs to be better, and that's more faithful to God, right? If we are more Christian, then we will see more hope, because then we are serving the true King. But if we're just stronger or more powerful or have more stuff, will that save us? That says the false hope for salvation. It cannot rescue. But what's going to rescue? Look at verse 18. But behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, those who reverence him, those who seek him, on those who hope in his steadfast love. That's where hope comes from. That he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in damnation. I love this. Hope comes from him. Hope comes to those who serve him, right? And it says that when we look at this, they're going to experience his grace, they're going to experience his guidance, and they're going to experience his salvation. It says they will be delivered from death. They're delivering their souls from death. What is that a picture of? Being rescued from hell, right? Salvation, right? And so this king is the God who rescues us from hell and keeps us alive in famine. What's a famine? A time when you don't have enough food, okay? A time when you don't have the things that you need. In our world, we live in the midst of a spiritual famine, right? In the country that we live in right now, is there great explosions of Christianity? Yes, there are, but are they widespread? No, right? We see Christianity still living in the midst of this land that is desolate because they're serving the King, right? There can be a great outbreak of Christian service here in Bonterre. It can happen. Right? When you look around in the city, and I've only lived here for, 16 years, but I can tell you, there's not a ton of saved people in this area. Okay? I think sometimes we forget that. We think we're in the middle of Missouri, there's lots and lots of Christians, but guys, walk up and down these streets. I talk to these people. There are a lot of people who do not know the Lord and have no desire to know the Lord. But could there be an explosion of salvations here? Yeah, but not because of us. It's going to happen because their hope is in the one who has steadfast love, right? The one who can deliver our souls from death, the one that can keep us alive in the midst of this famine until he returns, right? That's where our hope comes from, that we can be preserved in this dry and weary land because he is faithful, right? So then we move back into worship, right? He starts with worship, he ends with worship. He says, our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart is glad in him because we trust in his holy name. Our soul waits for the Lord. That means that we are expecting him to be that, right? We're expecting him to be our Lord, to be our help and our shield, our place of belonging, our place of safety. For our heart is glad, which means we rejoice in him because we trust his holy name, that he alone is perfect. Is there anyone else that falls into that category? No, but we serve him, right? So we rejoice. So it says, make sure that your praise is authentic, and as you live in this world day to day, you leave the church and you go out and you are serving in the community, in maybe even the political field. Remember that there's one king that you serve and one king that you serve alone, and make sure that you are finding your hope in him. And it ends with this prayer, and I pray this would be our prayer as well. It says, let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you, right? Let your steadfast love be upon us as we do what? Hope in you. So does our hope come from any other source? No, it never does. So let me give you just a couple quick takeaways here, and then I'll let you go and you can breathe and say, I'm never going to have him preach on politics again. And then if you look ahead and you know, because you guys should all know where I'm going, okay? It's not like I have any surprises for you, just next page, okay? If you know what's coming, just don't come next time, I guess, right? Number one, hope will not come from humanity. It's not going to happen, okay? It will not happen. So if we are looking for humanity to save us, will it work? No, we're all on the same sinking ship, okay? We are all dying and going to hell, so are we going to be able to save each other? Can you save yourself? So can a whole bunch of you save the world? No, right? But Jesus is the hope for all humanity. Humanity will not save the world, but he will. So we know this, but if we don't live this, do we really believe this? We don't. And this is what I want to end with. It is so easy in a setting like this to affirm these kinds of truths, but it's so hard when we leave this place and we have all the voices speaking into our heads, all the things that are broadcast into our home. It's so easy to be sucked into that. But our prayers when we leave this place should be, Lord, I want to be so grounded in your steadfast love and in your steadfast hope that all of that stuff is just noise. And I can constantly point myself and others back to you, right? And so our question then as we close is, how are we going to respond, right? Is there hope for this country? Absolutely. But that hope is in Jesus and in Jesus alone. And that's not just a Christian answer. That's the answer the world needs. And we should be pointing them back to them. So will we do that? Let's pray.